Ambassadors, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to be here representing my nation in NATO to address matters that are key to peace and security the world over. I would like to start by making a rather obvious observation. I'm a 59-year-old Anglo-Saxon heterosexual male, and I have never been discriminated against in my life. Indeed, everything has been laid on for me to allow me to reach my potential, irrespective of being the father of 3 children, irrespective of the fact that there have been many other competing demands in my life. I have been able to focus almost entirely on furthering my career. Indeed, in a hierarchical organisation like an army, at least in 2015, the only Chief of Army in Australia has to fit pretty much those criteria that I've outlined: male, Anglo-Saxon, white, heterosexual. And that, of course, is reinforced by the stories that my army tells about itself. From the landings at Gallipoli in April of 1915, through to the work indeed that we're doing now on contemporary operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, those stories are almost overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white Anglo-Saxon. And yet, of course, peace and security applies equally to men and women the world over, and it is absolutely inescapable that military organisations work better, more effectively and are more capable if they use all of the talent that is on offer in 100% of the world's population. And yet, almost every army in the world is making abject use of the talent that rests within 51% of the population, women. Now, I'm going to make another observation, and I do so with a caveat. I'm not an anthropologist. I have no sociological training. Indeed, I'm an arts graduate specialising in English literature and history. But I'm absolutely certain that for all of the great work that has been engendered under the Security Council Resolution 1325, much of the slow progress is as a result of men such as me, in positions such as I have held, not moving the actual resolution forward. That's quite a confronting observation or claim to make. And yet I have lived the journey over the last 4 years that has taken me from someone who was pretty unaware of 1325, really pretty unaware of the fact that 51% of the population were not being given the opportunities to reach their potential as I had been, to where I am now. A retired Chief of Army who during the last 4 years has got with the program. And got with the program primarily because I now understand that all military forces, indeed all industrial corporations, public servants, government, work more effectively if we embrace diversity and give much more gender equality. I've just concluded reading a piece of work by Robert Egnell, who I think is now writing in a really clear and cogent way about military organisations, military effectiveness and gender. And I agree strongly with 2 of his primary premises. Firstly, that it is both a matter of the head and the heart, encapsulated inside a leader, that moves great initiatives such as this forward. And secondly, that there is always going to be huge societal and government interest in the developments of a military, but the most effective changes have to be made from within, not imposed. Indeed, militaries the world over resist imposition. Most of their training, their culture, is in fact rooted in the idea of resistance. It's founded in the cultures of those organisations and the overwhelmingly male stories they tell about themselves. So, what makes a difference? Well, leaders need to understand the issues, see them in a way that they haven't seen them, become passionate about making change, and allow the heart to be the impetus behind whatever leadership they show. And there has to be a very sound appreciation of the real matters that make a military force more capable within the world that UNSCR 1325 wants to create. So let me tell you briefly about my own journey before I come back to some pertinent points where I think progress would be made more rapidly before I conclude. I began my appointment as Australia's Chief of Army in June of 2011, and I had been in and around soldiers all my life. I had dealt with instances of poor behaviour, but I had seen them as isolated incidents to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. It was a meeting I had in July of 2011 with our Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Elizabeth Broderick, that started to change my perspective and deepen my understanding of matters that sit around diversity and inclusivity. Liz queried me as to why the Australian Army, for its 112 years of existence at that stage, had been below 10% of its workforce as women, despite millions of Australian dollars being spent on recruiting and retention initiatives. And I had no ready answer for it. She queried me about the way we looked at instances of poor behaviour, indeed criminal behaviour, and why we weren't seeing the bigger picture. And again, I had no answer for it. She asked me why areas of our army were not open to women. And my initial response was, well, gee, I don't think that we want women doing those sorts of jobs to be pulled up very short by the telling question, why do you think that way and is that correct? Now, I have changed my mind 180 degrees over the course of the last 4 years. And I have seen Australian and women from all of the countries represented in this room doing extraordinary work in operational theatres around the globe. And I have acknowledged their work in a way that, up till 2011, I think I was poorly equipped to do. A telling meeting very soon after my first conversation with Liz Broderick made an essential difference to my approach. She asked me to meet with 3 women who had been the victims of vile and indeed criminal sexual harassment or abuse, who she had come to meet and learn about during her review into the treatment of women inside the Australian Defence Force. In what was for me the most distressing day of my long military career, I sat and heard 3 women's stories, and they tore at the heart. They documented a series of behaviour where their self-respect and dignity had been stripped away by those who were charged not just to protect their self-respect and dignity, but indeed give them the opportunities to reach their potential. They were their peers, or in some cases, their superiors. It changed my thinking. You have to tackle these issues in a way that resonates with your overwhelmingly male workforce. And that's where both the heart and the head have to work together. It's not enough just to believe. It's not enough just to examine the issues. I mean, Socrates is correct. A life unexamined is one not worth living. But Oliver Wendell Holmes, the American writer, is also correct when he observes that life is action and passion, and it behoves a man to embrace the passion and action of his times, lest he be judged to have never lived at all. We have made changes in the Australian Army that have been based on very sound policy, just like the Security Council Resolution 1325. We've changed the arrangements around flexible workplace. We've improved the way women and men are given the opportunities to step out of their service, be it to have children or anything else, and be welcomed back into our army without having lost 1 second of seniority. We have imposed particular requirements with regards to behaviour and treating our colleagues with respect that have been enforced rigorously over the last 3 years. Indeed, I have overseen the involuntary discharge of 300 soldiers and officers for not living to our values. But it is the language with which a leader has to be able to converse with his or her workforce that is the most essential aspect of this. And I think that the resolution 1325 is struggling because male leaders are not speaking to their military workforces with a very clear and unambiguous tone, laying the requirements firmly on everybody, but convincing them that they are actually part of building a more capable Army, Air Force or Navy as a result. If you resile from that, you won't make the changes that you need to. And there are some startling examples around gender in that regard. For example, the International Women's Conference in Beijing in 1970 was an extraordinary event. Almost 100,000 women gathered to lay a path that was quite revolutionary, not just for its time, but within recorded history. And there was so much to be applauded with those courageous women from all over the world having the strength and courage to outline the way the world could be a better place. And yet in the intervening period, as is the case for UNSCR 1325, progress has been at best ad hoc and haphazard. In my own country's case, establishing a program, again under the Sex Discrimination Commissioner called the Male Champions of Change, which initially started to look at the number of women on our top companies' boards. An enormous amount of work has been done to try and increase those numbers, but we have already seen them plateau and indeed in some cases start to diminish. Why is that? I think it is because senior men in government, in business, in the militaries, are not being as clear and as forthright as they must be if real progress is to be made. Let me conclude with one quote and a final observation. And the quote comes from Machiavelli. Now, Machiavelli is always slightly contentious to quote, and the fact that I'm standing in NATO headquarters doesn't stop me from going to him, because I think for all of his inhumanity in certain areas, he saw matters exceptionally clearly, even 500 years ago. He observed that there is no more delicate a matter to take in hand, nor more doubtful in its success, than to set up as a leader of change. For he who innovates will have for his enemies all those who are well off under the existing order of things. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are well off under the existing order of things are almost overwhelmingly men, both within militaries, within security organisations, within conflicted societies within which military organisations operate. The language that leaders such as me needs to use should be addressed unequivocally and unambiguously at those men, to make the point that we need to be part of creating a better world, a more secure one, and we will only do that if there is better gender equality and an embracing of the advantages that come with true diversity and inclusivity. You need to be clear with those men that there is no place for them unless they can also embrace those attributes. It is not enough, as Machiavelli knew, to appeal to the better part of human nature. Of course, most of us always want the best, but there are a sizable minority who are very, very well off under the existing order of things. And there the head and the heart have to come together to confront them, to hold them to account, so that we, not just as a military or as a security organisation, but indeed as a species on the planet, can move forward. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I am available here to meet with people at an individual level for the morning, and I'll certainly be involved in the activity on Tuesday. It's been a great privilege to be given the opportunity to speak, and I wish everybody well in what I think is one of humanity's great endeavours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Morrison, for this very, very ambitious and impressive speech from a practitioner, from a practice in the real life of the military, from your own experience. And you're really somebody who has made a difference in his own career, and we are very grateful for having you here.